Good evening. Welcome to Energy Awareness. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, 2009. This is your host, T. Love. I'm a Reiki Master and Certified Sound Therapist with a private practice in Sussex County, New Jersey, where we are streaming to you live as we do every Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Joining us tonight is Liza Shaw. Liza is an expert in the area of forgiveness. She may not admit that, but that's how I picture her. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist as well as an advanced clinical hypnotherapist. And our topic tonight is First, Forgive Yourself. We'll be discussing how to forgive, who to forgive, and how forgiving ourselves first allows all of our other relationships to thrive. So it's a great show. If you have any questions and you want to make a comment or ask a question, you can dial in to 347-202-0227, or if you prefer, you may join the live chat online. So let's get started with the evening. Good evening, Liza. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, you're quite welcome. This is so exciting. We have a whole lot to cover. And our topic, First, Forgive Yourself. This is so very necessary, particularly right now, in my opinion anyway, if we want to experience peace and harmony in our lives. But you know what? Let's face it. Forgiveness isn't exactly the first thing you think about after your happiness is shattered or your heart gets broken, or worse, when both of those things happen at the same time. And sometimes I think when you're in the midst of all the pain that goes along with those things that happen that ultimately require forgiveness to move on, you're more apt to be thinking of hate, which seems to manifest pretty naturally under those circumstances. So to me, forgiveness is a conscious decision that we make to let go of, resentment, hate, revenge, and it actually allows us to rid ourselves of the thoughts and feelings that we hold on to about both the person and the offense that was committed against us. So let's start with that. How would you define forgiveness?
Well, I see forgiveness as a process. And it is a choice. I like how you said that. And it's also, it's really the end result of a process of grieving. And so, the beginning of the process of grieving, you're not at a place where you're going to be able to forgive somebody for something or yourself for something that caused you the grief. But what it is a state of being. It's distinct from a concept or an idea. The way I look at it is that forgiveness is an experience that I can have in the present, like the difference between letting chocolate melt in my mouth or having someone tell me about chocolate melting in my mouth.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
that was a good analogy. Cause
I borrowed it from someone else. I can't take credit for that, but it's a really great example. And so forgiveness is like similarly to the way chocolate can melt in your mouth, and that's just distinct from hearing about it. When I'm in a state of forgiveness, it's now that it occurs. It's an occurring thing that happens. When I'm not, I'm not. So it's kind of like, you're either it or you're not. You're either in a forgiveness state or you're not.
Right.
And so I think that's an important thing to distinguish before we even go any further because, a lot of clients will talk to me about, how do I forgive? And we'll get into that in the show. But people think that forgiveness is like once you say you're going to forgive somebody, it happens.
Right.
And just saying I forgive somebody doesn't mean you forgive them.
Yeah, it's not that quick.
No. And
I like the way that you said it's the end result of a process of grieving because people think of it that way. And it is a state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And the only way to get to it is to practice it and to be willing to have the experiences of attempting to be forgiving and not be it. And then feel the pain of that and, instead of just grieving further and letting yourself go back down into depression or whatever, that you could actually just learn from, I fell back in the hole again here. I'm willing to learn from whatever I'm experiencing as I can't forgive right now, even though I thought I had forgiven, and then get back in that state. So it's either happening or it's not happening, and we have to be able to practice a little bit before it happens successfully.
Okay, I understand that. That's actually a good point. Now, we already have a caller on the line, so let's see if this person would like to speak to us. Hi, this is Energy Awareness. Do you have a question? Hello? I guess not.
Okay.
Sometimes that happens. Call back if you have a question, but they're
That's
not.
right.
They're not responding. So
Okay.
we'll just not worry about that for right now. That's a very good point. I think sometimes, for me, it seems to me that forgiveness for some people is that final stage of love that saves us in a way.
Yeah.
You always hear about people forgiving everyone they ever wronged when they're on their deathbeds. And I have to look at that sometimes and I say, what is with that? Isn't that just a cop-out? Is that just a way to, get out of it and think you're going to go to heaven or something? I mean, no, I'm not trying to be funny, but really, what's the deal with that? Because you always hear about families where there's so much dysfunction, and then so-and-so on their deathbed forgave everyone.
Right. Well, no, I think that, it could, I don't know what the specific situation would be to be able to say if it's a cop-out or not, but I think that all human beings actually have a longing for the peace and the, what's possible when you can let go of things from your past that have been running you in your life and that have been causing you to continue to re-experience the pain. You mentioned resentment before, and I have a neat way that I kind of redefine resentment for people that I think is really, it provides a new way to learn how to forgive. And the way I define resentment, if you break it into 3 parts, so it's resentment. And so resentment, the way I look at it, it's not just anger or blame. It's anything that I've been running inside my head over and over and over and over again and relating to it like it's the truth and it's real.
Very good.
So, I've got these old ideas that I run around in my head, whether they be about, what I think of specific things that happen on the news or something that happened in my family when I was a child or something that occurred at work. But when I get an idea of whatever that is and I come to a conclusion about it, then I carry that out in the world and I keep looking for that, looking kind of like for evidence of it to keep reappearing in my life, and that gets resent through my mind. And actually I get to re-experience the pain from before each time I go back to it. And so that's resentment. And I, regarding the deathbed forgiveness thing, I think that, deep down inside of every human being, there is a desire for being able to let go of that stuff, that there's something else possible, and we want to experience that.
Yeah, and so they just need to experience it again, or they don't want to experience it again because that resentment pops up, correct?
Well, yeah. Either we're going to keep walking through our lives continuing to see more of the same and experience our resentment over and over and over again, or we might get really done with it. And some people, it takes them their whole lives until they're lying on their deathbed to be done with it, which is just a tragedy because we can give it up now. We don't have to wait till we're dead or till, and we don't know if tomorrow's our last day or today.
Right, and the worst part is you're not just affecting yourself, you're affecting all these other lives because of the lack of forgiveness.
Exactly.
Why do we find it so hard to forgive?
Well, I think it's complicated. We're not taught it. There aren't very many role models. It's not like we see our governments forgiving each other very easily, or our parents. Our parents don't always do the best job of modeling that. And again, I'm not blaming anybody. This is just the way that things are right now. Mm-hmm. It's not something I was taught. I don't know if it was something you were taught, but most of us don't have a whole lot of life experience practicing forgiveness. So all it is a matter of having no practice at something, so we're unskilled. It doesn't mean that we can't learn it. It just means we don't know how.
Right. And it's not been taught to us.
Right, and the paradigm that we live in our world is one of right and wrong, good and bad, winner, loser. Yep. Like there's not really enough room for forgiveness inside that kind of a context. We would have to be willing to move to some other kind of a realm where we're not blaming, shaming, or guilting someone else or ourselves in order to really, truly forgive. There's really a difference between authentically forgiving and just, the acceptance stuff, which is still kind of in that world of right and wrong.
Is that what lasting forgiveness is? When you're able to forgive, and truly forgive? Because sometimes, like you said, we say we forgive and we don't.
Right.
So I've heard the term lasting forgiveness, and I'm not really quite sure what that means, and I'm not even sure if that's a real term.
I'm not familiar with it, but it sure sounds like it. I just call it maybe authentic forgiveness, where, again, if forgiveness is a state of being and it's something that either you're doing or you're not doing, then once you get enough practice at something, it becomes second nature, and then it is what is, like the way that Tiger Woods is an amazing golfer, and that is the way it is, but he wasn't always an amazing golfer. So we have to get practice at forgiving.
Okay. And not just others, but of ourselves. I mean,
absolutely.
All of the relationships that we have need give and take to survive. You can't just be a giver and you can't just be a taker, or the relationship won't survive. We all know that.
Right.
But with that said, we all need to make an effort in every relationship we have, whether it's marital, family, friend, whatever.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think people do, but when it comes to the relationship that they have with themselves, they don't necessarily take care, and we seem to neglect that one, which is probably the most important relationship that we'll ever have. So why is it that people either don't realize or don't understand that they need to forgive themselves first so their other relationships will thrive? Or is that just me thinking that's how it should work?
Well, I think forgiveness of ourselves is extremely important because until we do, we can still kind of be like a leaf blowing in the wind. We can still have these buttons that we think people are pushing. If I walk around feeling guilty because I think at the core I'm a bad mother, because I, have made some mistakes as a mother and I haven't been able to forgive myself for them, then anything that my husband might say, if he's looking to push a button in me, that could even hint at me being a bad mother, and I then become essentially what appears to be controlled by something he said, and I wasn't really controlled by anything he said. I was controlled by the guilt I still have in me, and then I react to him by defending something or fighting back with something mean that I would say about him. And, ultimately, if there's nothing there to have to defend because it's been forgiven already, I'm free. People can say what they want to say. There's nothing that can be said that would, quote, push my buttons because there is no button.
But you have to get to that point where you know that how do you get to the point where you don't allow that button to be pushed? How do you get rid of the button, I guess?
Well, you get rid of the button by going through the process that we're calling forgiveness. And I've got kind of a process. I've sort of identified some of the things that need to occur in order for it to happen.
Okay.
But, you asked about why people don't realize how important their relationship is to themselves.
Yeah, they don't understand the one with themselves should come first. I think it's because we don't think we deserve, but I want its opinion.
No, I think that's an absolutely, we walk around with an idea, there's a self-resentment right there, that I don't deserve something. I don't deserve a good relationship with myself, or I don't deserve a healthy relationship with everybody else, because ultimately there's something wrong with me. And we actually are trained in this culture to think that our happiness and our peace or our fulfillment is going to come in something from outside of us. Whether whether it be the relationship of my dreams, or if it's once I get my master's degree, or when I get the best job, or whatever, my good friendships. It's not about anything out there. It's always got to start here. First, we can't give something away that we don't have.
Well, that makes sense, but I think it's difficult for people to do.
It's very difficult for people to do, and especially when we don't have very many people teaching how to do it in families, in schools, in the culture at large. Instead we have a whole world set up to reinforce the whole drama world of right and wrong, and victim and persecutor, and it's just there are very few places where we've been given the opportunity to actually practice authentic forgiveness.
Yeah, I really don't. I can't think of one.
Well, here's the paradox of it, T. If I want to learn how to forgive and really authentically experience forgiveness, the first thing I have to be willing to do is go through some pain because pain is the thing that would lead me to need to forgive.
Oh, sure, I can understand that, but I'm trying to think of where one could actually learn forgiveness the proper way, and there really is no tool out there. It's not taught in academic world. It's not taught in spiritual world even. I mean, I was brought up Catholic, and I don't remember anybody teaching me this is how you forgive someone.
No, in fact, what we're taught is quite the opposite, because we're really raised to protect ourselves from pain in this world. And so as long as we're lowering our risk for pain, we are not giving ourselves the opportunity to practice. You know, if we want to become experts in the field of forgiveness, what we have to do is be willing to let ourselves feel some pain in our lives and be willing to practice. And then, of course, find teachers who are willing to work with people. This is the kind of work I do with my clients. I'll coach them through stuff like this. But also, you know, more and more people need to be doing this and teaching this. It would be wonderful if the schools would discuss forgiveness when a child gets hurt by another child in the classroom, rather than sending the child who was the, quote, bad one to the principal's office. Imagine a world where the entire classroom became a learning experience for both children in forgiveness.
Sure, that would be unheard of.
I know. I'd love it, though. Wouldn't it be a great world?
You should do that. You should go into a school and do that.
I've got all kinds of plans.
Fix the world. Let's not start with the schools. Why don't we start with the heads of government, like you said?
That's right.
Be a bit better. You know, live and let live. But truly, forgiveness is a difficult thing. And guilt, you were talking about guilt before.
Yeah.
It plays a huge role in relationships, including the one we have with ourselves. We feel guilty about some of the things that we do and some of the things that, and again, it comes back to that deserving stuff. Oh, well, you know, I don't feel like I deserve it, and I don't want to, and then you feel guilty if you do something that you felt you shouldn't have done.
Right.
You didn't deserve. It's a vicious circle.
Yes, it is.
And trying to get rid of that so that we can move on is very difficult. So what kind of tips do you have to be able to tell our listeners, this is what you need to do, gang?
Yeah. Well, again, it comes back down to willingness. You don't have to know how yet, but the first step is to ask yourself, am I willing to let go of guilt? After really you have to weigh consequences with the pros and the cons. So we have to look at if guilt has to have been playing some kind of a function in my life for me to keep it, because humans aren't really set up to be doing something that has no benefit whatsoever to us.
Right.
So
what's the payoff, as Dr. would say?
What's the payoff
out of it? Yeah.
So we have to look at what is the payoff that I get from carrying guilt around or from flinging it at other people.
Well, what is the payoff?
Well, the payoff for guilt, I mean, there are many, and the ones I've come up with are, I think that we carry guilt around so that we can continue to judge, so that we can continue to make distinctions about right and wrong, so that we can still, as long as I still feel guilty about being a bad mother, which, by the way, this used to be one of the things that I hadn't forgiven myself for, and I completely am free of that now. And I think every mother probably deals with this issue. Am I a good mother? Am I a bad mother? But if I'm walking around with that, and then my husband, quote, pushes my buttons about it, or I think he's pushing buttons when really all he's doing is activating the guilt that I don't want to admit I feel, and then I get defensive, one way that I could try to distract myself from that pain I haven't let go of yet is to point the finger at my husband and say, sure, you're the one who's the bad father.
Right.
Let me give you all the reasons, you've done this and you did that, and get the blame off of me, and I get to put it on him. And so I think it's really crucial for me I had to admit to myself before I could let go of my guilt about my thinking I was a bad mother or would never be good enough. I had to admit that I hold on to it so I can use it against him.
So it's not like you're holding on to it to judge other people, but to actually use it in a way that, I hate to say it like this, but I don't know how else to word it.
Yeah.
Use it in a way where you're actually not the victim, you are the victim and they're the bad guy.
Yeah, it's like a way to justify continuing to feel bad. and it's not conscious. I'm not suggesting I walk around, going, how can I take the blame off me and put it
Yeah,
somewhere
I'm sure no one does that. Nobody likes
No.
the feeling that guilt brings.
Right.
It's not a good feeling.
One of the things I wanted to also make sure I mentioned is, I'm a psychotherapist, marriage and family therapist, but I'm kind of unusual in that I do talk about myself and my experiences with my clients because I think it's one of the most important tools that I have to provide something for someone else. If I can share, I'm human. I've had the same struggles and the same suffering, and I've found solutions, and I'm not anything special. You can actually find these very same solutions. We're all able to do this stuff. We just have to look at whether or not we're willing to give up the payoff.
Right.
Am I willing to stop judging all parents, good and bad, and just be able to be with, that parents sometimes mess up, and I'm one of them.
I don't think there's a parent around that hasn't messed up.
I know.
I mean, I want to meet that person or those people because it doesn't exist.
I've never been perfect, no matter how hard I tried to be.
Nor is anyone else. There is no such thing as a perfect person. So
That's right.
it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that when people are, if they're feeling guilty about certain things and they are trying to, I don't want to say push it off on someone else, but doesn't that alleviate their guilt?
Yeah, temporarily, though. That's the illusion of it, is that I take the payoff of the temporary fix of being able to distract myself from that guilt that I still have, and I use it just to kind of get me through right now, but it will come back up because I'm still not forgiven of myself. I have not forgiven myself. And since I haven't, the cycle continues. It's just a vicious cycle going around. Anytime there's an old quote I love, which is, if you spot it, you've got it. So I go around in the world, and when I spot the thing that's unforgiven in me, I end up seeing it, and I get mad about it, or it triggers something in me. I get sad about it, or I get whatever. I may end up getting defensive. But ultimately, I'm only noticing it, and it's only triggering an emotion in me because it's unforgiven in me. So if I can get to what is it in me that is still incomplete, something I haven't let go of, weigh the guilt, weigh the payoff of actually, what I take from it, what I actually get to take as a payoff, and decide, am I willing to stop taking that payoff? Then I could be ready to start the process of forgiveness.
Isn't the payoff usually in and of itself not a great thing for you?
It is, right. You're absolutely right. Ultimately, it becomes the very thing that perpetuates the result you didn't want in the first place. Right.
So you're really not helping yourself at all with this
No.
payoff that we walk around
right.
getting off on, if you will.
Yeah, we get to have a little temporary fix from our bad feeling.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be better if we were at the helm of whether or not we had a bad feeling to begin with?
Right.
If we're the one driving that bus.
And nip it in the bud and just move forward with, the world would be a whole lot happier place.
That's right.
I think that, it's almost like, I think you can forgive people without giving up your power. And by that I mean you don't excuse their actions.
Right. That's right.
There's a difference. And that's not what forgiveness is all about.
No.
But I know a lot of people believe that forgiving someone means you're forgetting or condoning what happened. And that's just not true, is it?
No, in fact, it's the 180-degree opposite. And this is the part that's so paradoxical. I mean, what you just said, that the payoff we're taking isn't even working. It's not even good for us, and yet we keep taking it.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues the vicious cycle. So what we actually do by not forgiving ourselves and letting go, and by not giving up blaming and shaming and right and wrong and all that, what we're actually doing is continuing to perpetuate everything that we say we don't want. And we keep getting it. It's like, the more you see it out in the world, the more you try to avoid it, and the more you try to avoid it, the more you're scanning the horizon, just waiting for it to happen again, thinking you could protect yourself from it. But ultimately what you're actually doing is only noticing it, and that's the thing you notice, and everything else you let kind of disappear. So I end up putting myself back in situations where I have the exact same experience that I haven't forgiven, and then I get the temporary fix if I go and blame someone else, or if I try to justify something or explain or whatever. I feel a little bit better, but ultimately I end up experiencing it again and again and again. And isn't that what condoning is? Like saying it's okay that this keeps happening even though I don't like it?
Right. And so in that case, you're condoning yourself.
Exactly. You're walking around justifying your own misery.
Right. And that's just as bad as if you're excusing the actions of someone else.
Yeah.
You know, people will say, well, guy hits his wife and she keeps staying there, she's forgiving him. No, she's not.
Right.
She's not forgiving. She's just allowing it to happen, and she's
That's
not
right.
excusing. She needs to know that their actions are not excused. But the guilt part, I mean, where we have our guilt, sometimes it's something that stems from years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How do you figure that out? Because sometimes you don't know. I guess that's when you go to a therapist because figure it out on our own,
Right. No, we can't figure this stuff out on our own. And even, the best therapists are the ones I think that go and do the work themselves with another therapist before they try to work with a client. And I am no different than anybody else. We can't teach something we don't already know.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just kind of clanging cymbals. We're not really giving anything away because we don't have it. So we have to work through that, and if we don't already know it, it would take someone else to coach us, to get us to a place where we could consider something we didn't know.
Yeah.
And consider, actually, we didn't know it. It's that blind spot thing that...
Right. That's exactly what it is. It's a blind spot. You don't know it.
Right.
Right.
So it's helpful to have a coach or, a therapist or somebody who can work with you to kind of go through the past and see what are the resentments you've been holding on to. In the 12-step recovery program, they have it's sort of like a mentor program called sponsorship, and they, basically when the newcomer comes in, they team up with someone who works with them, and the biggest part of the work they do is having that more advanced person coach the other person through what are all your old resentments that you've been carrying around that have been running your life, that you keep searching for evidence of in your life, and then every time it comes you think you're the victim of it instead of realizing you're carrying this. And
you're causing it.
Yeah, you're the only reason it's occurring because, the 9 things that happened before that 10th one you didn't notice, but the 10th time it looks like the past and you go, I knew it, I'm going to be a victim again, just like before. Right,
and you're kind of drawing it to you. It's like the law of attraction. You're actually bringing it to you.
Yes,
absolutely. And of course, we've all heard, that expression, you only hurt the ones you love the most, whether it's your spouse, or your partner, your friend, your siblings, children, parents, whatever it is. When we're hurt by these people, whether it's intended or not, and it's betrayal or rejection, abuse, lies, insults, whatever it is, it's hard to get past that. And sometimes we hold major grudges over the smallest things. Not that size matters in this case, but we do tend to dwell and, like you said before, replay the situation in our heads or speak of them frequently to the point where you continue to build that resentment.
That's right.
You become hostile, vengeful. It's just not pretty.
I know.
And, I mean, when we know this intellectually, and I think most people do, why do we still hold the grudges and become resentful and unforgiving? Why do we do that?
It's almost like an addiction, I think, T. It's like it's bad for you, but you do it anyway.
But do people know? I mean, I think on an intellectual level.
On an intellectual level, they know it's bad.
But on an emotional, solar plexus in your heart level.
Yes, they don't realize, most people have no idea they're getting something out of it. They don't realize, actually, it's possible we're getting high on our own body chemistry when we get all jacked up and, like you said, repeat over and over again the offense. And also we get to go around and collect support from the people around us. We get to go get agreement from our mothers and our sisters or our brothers or our friends. And we get to be the right ones, and those people over there that we're mad at get to be wrong. and we get all jacked up on our own body chemistry. And literally, there's all kinds of research. You know the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you remember those funny little monster guys that are like represented the neural pathways in the brain that get all juiced up? That's what happens. We actually get so used to feeling the drama, feeling all that rush of adrenaline in our brains when we feel upset, that becomes like crack cocaine. Our brain actually gets used to it and doesn't know what to do without it.
And I think that's the ticket right there, is your brain gets used to it and it doesn't know what to do without it, where instead of, we talked about The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, a few weeks ago, and where it says, you can have those feelings that make you feel horrible, if you will. And it's funny because the nervousness, the anxiousness, the bad feelings give you the same type of adrenaline rush, if you will, as excitement.
Yes.
So you can turn it into the positive and the excitement and then go to exhilaration, or you're going to be a whole lot better off stress-wise.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
And that could actually help a person to lead them to be more forgiving, because sometimes grudges, I've seen people hold grudges for years. I mean, grudges that are, like I said, the smallest things. What is up with that?
Right. Yeah.
Because other things can be forgiven that are much bigger, but that one tiny thing, there's got to be something to it.
The other thing I wanted to say was that human beings, in the world of survival, rather than having a really great life, having a thriving life, we have an illusion that we need to stay safe and that we need to lower risk and we need to eliminate pain as much as possible. And so what we do when we're trying to eliminate risk is that we think that if we can make the world a predictable world, then we can be safer. So, we have an experience in our lives that is painful, and then we might our brain, trying to lower the risk of ever feeling that pain again, grabs a hold of an idea or a conclusion about what happened. And then once you make the conclusion about what happened, and then what you do is attempt to avoid the same pain by continuing to apply that idea to any situation in the future. And like I said, then what you start doing is searching and searching, thinking that you're protecting yourself from that same situation, but you're actually attracting it to you because it's the only thing you notice. And then you keep going, why do I keep getting in these same kind of relationships with the same kind of men? Well, because I'm creating that I need to protect myself from that. And then I'm walking around with the old ideas, the old resentments that I created, resentments, sending them through my brain over and over again, getting agreement from my friends on it or my mom or something, and then go out in the world. And, I'm married, so this isn't exactly accurate for me, but if I was dating and single, go out in the world and search for the guy who would never do to me what happened before. Except that when I'm searching for that, I'm waiting for the evidence to show up that he's doing the thing to me that was done before. And 9 times out of 10, he might not. But the 10th time, it might not even be that he's doing something to me that was done before. It could just be, he showed up late for a date. And how do I know? He could have, I don't know, his mother might have been sick or something. But before I even hear what's going on in his head or his world, I react. And then my reaction causes an unconscious reinforcement of the whole thing, because it certainly isn't fun for him to show up on a date and I'm yelling at him because he's late.
Right.
And I end up manifesting the very thing that I was thinking I could protect myself from.
Why is it, you said earlier, that we live in an illusion where we have to be safe? Why is that an illusion?
Because human beings...
we do have to be safe, don't we?
Well, we're all going to die, T.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, but
that's why. I think that's why. I really do, because ultimately we're, it's human to want to survive.
Yes. But when I picture safe, let's take a relationship thing, I'm thinking safe like protecting your heart from being broken.
Yes.
And... Yeah.
Well, that feels like death. Have you ever had your heart broken?
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels horrible.
Sit on, put through the meat grinder, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
And then we say, I'm never going to do that again.
Exactly. And you say, I'm never going to get involved with anybody again because I don't ever want to go through this heart-stomping, meat-grinding thing that my heart, you don't think you can put your heart back together.
Right.
You just don't. It just doesn't seem like you can. So I guess it's an illusion because that's what we're thinking when we're going through it. But when it's all said and done and you realize after the fact that, it was horrible or horrific going through what you went through, but now, everything's okay and I made it.
Yeah, in fact, all of my needs are being taken care of at any moment in life. And, we can either live our lives in fear that something bad will happen and we'll be hurt, or we don't. And if we do or we don't, we're all still going to come to the end of life and then it'll be over. Why would we choose living in fear, having essentially, dooming ourselves or sentencing ourselves to the same thing happening over and over when we could have a life that's completely altered from that?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, I love the quote Helen Keller said, avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Right. You may as well have it be a daring adventure because
we're all still we're gonna live and then it'll be over. And I want to be able to say, wow, that was a cool adventure. Yeah, I got hurt, but I learned from every time I got hurt.
Well, and if you never got hurt, I don't think you'd ever, it's kind of like that sorrow-joy thing. If you never get in sorrow, you don't really get the joy.
Exactly.
And people who are saying that, they've never had a moment of sorrow, you almost have to feel bad for them because you do need a little bit of that to understand what the joy is.
Yes,
and
I know.
The deeper the sorrow, the greater the joy. You're not wishing horrible, sorrowful things on anybody, but only the deeper the sorrow when you come out of it and you can, rise like the phoenix, the greater the joy.
That's right. And I think in the world that we live in, which is a very limited, linear-seeming world, and we'll get spiritual here for a minute, we're limited by our linear way of looking at things, like cause and effect, right and wrong, all that stuff we've already talked about. I don't know if human beings, a lot of human beings have trouble with the idea that we could have joy. We don't need the pain first to have the joy. We could just have it. But we have been kind of trained in this linear world we live in that the only thing, you have to have the sorrow in order to be able to appreciate the joy. It's not true. We can appreciate joy when we've been in sorrow, but it's not the only way. We can actually just choose joy, and actually the only way to do that is through letting go of your resentments and forgiving.
And I'll tell you that joy has come up on this program in the past, month on almost every single show.
Oh, really?
Basically the same thing. I think it was, Elizabeth Fate brought it up, and I brought it up on another show, and then somebody else brought it up, and it was always the same movie, The Bucket List.
Oh, yeah.
In that movie, I remember, I asked people after I saw the movie, did you get anything out of that? Did you have a profound moment? Because I did, and people looked at me like I was crazy. And then I told them about Morgan Freeman asking Jack Nicholson, the two questions that you're asked is, did you experience joy and did you bring joy to others? And that to me was like, wow, that's really what life is all about.
Yeah.
It's about joy. And in order to have that joy, you have to be somewhat forgiving. You have not somewhat. You have to be
You have to be forgiving. Yeah, there's no somewhat. You're either forgiving or you're not. Yeah, you got that. Yeah.
And it's sometimes, I think for the most part, you can be a very forgiving person or someone is a forgiving person, and then something happens and they're not forgiving in that instance. Doesn't mean they're not a forgiving person. It means they're having a tough time with that one particular issue.
Yeah, I mean, again, forgiveness is a state of being. It's a state. So when we're being forgiving, we're being forgiving. When we're not, we're not. It doesn't mean anything about me as a human being except that I'm human and I'm working on it. If I'm working on it. And sometimes people may not do it till their deathbed, like we said.
Yeah, which is, I think that's the saddest thing, because that to me is like the final stage of love. I think forgiveness is the final stage of love. It's like to forgive somebody is, first of all, you usually love the person that you forgive.
Yeah.
And at some level. And it doesn't have to be a spouse. It can be a coworker. But because of compassion, which is the one energy that connects all of us on the planet, you have this need to be able to not see somebody hurt.
Yes.
When you know you've faulted and you've hurt someone, I know that I've done things to people inadvertently. You didn't think you did anything, and then they tell me that they were hurt. your heart, mine does anyway, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Absolutely.
never meant to hurt that person.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point with me sometimes where the next time I see the person for maybe the next year, I think about that moment.
Absolutely.
I have trouble letting go of the fact that I actually hurt this person.
I hurt that person, yeah. And I'm sure you've heard the old Jungian quote, Carl Jung said, what we resist persists.
Yes.
So when I feel bad that I hurt someone and then I cover it up and I make all kinds of excuses or reasons or, try to defend myself or worse, criticize someone else quickly to try to get the blame off of me or the responsibility off of me, I should say, I actually rob myself of the opportunity to make it disappear from my life and not hurt someone in the same way again.
Right.
So instead, I distract myself, and then I end up, blaming or shaming or whatever I do, and it ends up, and, like you said, for a whole year, you have a hard time letting go, and every time you think of that person, you think, oh, I really hurt them. I'm a bad person, or I'm a bad friend, or whatever, when actually there was an opportunity. There is always an opportunity right this moment, now. Any now moment there is. Mm-hmm. There's the opportunity to give up the blame and the shame and the resentment and all of the old ideas and get back down to the way you were before you hurt that person or before you committed whatever the error was.
And it's about you. Because
Absolutely.
I know that if I've done something to someone, I'm not blaming them. I'm actually feeling the pain and thinking, oh, God, I can't believe I hurt them this much.
That's right, if you're honest about it.
And you're forgetting to forgive yourself. I have great trouble forgiving myself. And I know you have to forgive yourself first, but there are times when you've done something where and people have said, oh, let it go, T. I didn't think about that for 5 years. I can't believe you brought it back up.
Right.
But, I know I hurt you. Yeah, but I got over it. Right. Somebody's holding on. And I must be one of those people that holds on.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
Well, it's not really even that important to figure out why, because that will just be another distraction.
Yeah, right. There you go.
We have the opportunity to stop it today, right now.
Right. Yep.
But again, we have to look at the payoff and see, am I really willing to give up stopping doing that stuff? Am I willing to, do I really want my life to be something other than that predictable outcome where I can just say, I knew it, I knew he was going to abandon me, I knew she was going to hurt me, I knew they were going to have an affair, or whatever those things are, that we walk around with and we're sure is going to happen eventually. Can I give all that up?
Yeah, that's a question that people have to ask themselves, what the payoff is. Sometimes they don't know the payoff, and it's difficult. And a lot of people don't want to admit that there is a payoff.
I know.
They're just so adamant that they're right.
Yes, and that will keep, so the right and wrong world for those folks who are there, and it's all perfect, but if someone's not willing to give it up, that's really their saying, I'm not willing to give this stuff up. For that, when they say, well, there's no payoff. That's not true. There's not really anything good about this at all. Well, I didn't say good, but it's that it's serving a purpose or a function for you. Right. And it is so hidden. It's like the way that, they say goldfish swim around in water and have no idea they're surrounded by water. They just think it's life. This is just what is.
Right.
We've got oxygen all surrounding us all the time, but we don't really notice it. It's just, that's our world. And it disappears, and people don't realize that the hidden payoff for not forgiving myself or the hidden payoff for not forgiving someone else is so hidden, it's right in front of my face, and I don't see it. Mm-hmm. And so you really it does take another person, especially it requires that you talk with somebody or share with somebody who is who's gone through this, who's been able to search themselves and discover the hidden payoffs. And they're going to be unique to every single one of us, but they do kind of have similar categories, like getting to be right, not looking bad, not being wrong, not being evil, being good, being righteous, being getting to be the expert, the know-it-all, having a whole bunch of people be on my side. It's that kind of stuff that's the hidden payoff, and honestly, it's kind of nasty. Like, human beings have a nasty side to us until we can get honest and look at it and face it and just look right in the mirror, no longer making myself wrong for it, no longer blaming myself for it, but simply looking in the mirror and saying, I've been nasty sometimes. I've accepted the payoff of blaming my husband for something that really I was feeling guilty about. And I want to stop doing that. It's time today for me to let go of it and stop this crazy cycle.
Right.
Until we do that, we can't let it go.
Yeah, and I think that that's the hard part too. As with any addiction, you have to accept that you have it first. So
that's right.
It's the same type of thing.
Yeah.
And, forgiveness is a conscious act.
Yes.
And it has a process that you need to go through from recognizing, acknowledging, and then acting, which is what we're talking about now, by making an effort to be forgiving. And one of my questions for you was, how exactly does one reach a state of forgiveness? But pretty much covered that by saying you can't, you need help.
Well, you can, but you do need help. It's a both and. I mean, people, the way I look at it is that God, they say where two or more are gathered in His name, He is present.
Right.
Now, I'm not a very religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person, and I absolutely know that law, that's a law. That's like a universal law that that God can work through other human beings if I allow them to.
Sure.
So God can help me by allowing another human being to help me, but I also have to be willing to say, I need help, I can't do this myself. But I have kind of developed a little bit of I wouldn't call it a program exactly, but there are some steps in the process that I think if I break them down, it can help the listeners to understand how the process can go.
Sure, go ahead.
And I do still think it's very important to either hire a therapist that's really experienced this kind of thing before and is an expert in this area, or 12-step recovery is a great way for people to do this if they've got addictions. And really, codependency is this people addiction thing. It's just as much an addiction as cocaine addiction is.
Right.
So it can kind of work for really anybody. But, essentially, we got the practice already established, that this is a practice. This is not, okay, I know it, now I'm perfect at it, and I'm done.
Right.
We can't know how to forgive until we've allowed ourselves to have the experiences of pain and get present to the pain that we've avoided, that we've lowered our risk from. And so we have to let ourselves grieve. And when we let ourselves grieve, trial and error is a process of learning. That's why it's called trial and error.
Right.
Because we have to mess up and learn from the mess up in order to grow. And so, again, people tend to reduce their risk each time that they get in pain in their lives, and then they don't really give themselves the opportunity to learn to let go and forgive. So one of the first things is be willing to consider this is all practice. It's not you have to be perfect at it as soon as you learn it.
Right.
The next thing is willingness. We have to become willing to let go of our old ideas. We have to, and the old ideas are those resentments or the ideas that we concluded which are keeping us supposedly safe. We think it's keeping us safe, but really it's not. It's just an illusion. We have to be willing to stop trying to predict the future, because that is where we keep seeing the same result. And when we do decide that we are willing to give up the old ideas from the past and that we don't want to keep seeing the past in the present any longer, then we really make a decision that we want something more for our lives, that I'm done with the crazy train. I'm done with the vicious cycles of, terrified that I'm going to get the same pain I got before and ending up with it again.
Okay. And then we have the third one.
And what did I say? Practice, willingness. Mm-hmm. And then it's time then at that point, once I've given up or said that I would give up, all I'm saying is I'm willing to give it up.
Right.
I still don't know how.
Right.
Now the point is I sit down with someone who is not someone who's going to agree with me. It's the worst mistake we could make now is to go find someone who would agree with me about all my resentments.
Right.
So it's actually in service to me if I could find someone who would hold me accountable for my old ideas that keep me stuck.
Sure. That's important, so you get the spot that you're in.
Exactly. The worst thing of all is when I go and call my girlfriend and go, can you believe what a jerk so-and-so's been? And then they say, yeah, they are a jerk. it's better, I surround myself with friends I have amazing friends now, T. And they will say to me, if I call them up and I say, I'm really struggling with something that happened. Let me tell you what happened. And then I say, so-and-so did da-da-da. And they go, yeah, and what did you do?
Learned.
Exactly. And so now I can just get honest immediately. Instead of defending or blaming, I could say, what did I do? Oh, I really took this personally, which is part of the next piece. When I start to examine my old ideas and I'm willing to give them up, I have to admit first how self-centered I have been.
Okay, yes, good point.
That, the whole world continues to disappoint me only because I had an expectation and the world didn't show up the way I wanted it to.
Right.
And that, it's kind of an ugly truth about it, but the truth will set me free after I let go of being mad about it.
Right.
So, essentially we have to let go of that self-centeredness at that point. Once I see how self-centered I've been, and then I realized, I was just working with a client today who really got this. She kept saying, Liza, why do I keep holding on to this idea that I'm not worthy? And I don't like myself. And I said, like I said to you, the why question is going to get us all distracted, but let's just look at that for a minute. I said, tell me some of the things that keep that, some of the old ideas you have that keep it in place, this argument you have with yourself that you're not worthy and that, you're ultimately never going to be happy. And she said, well, what it is like there really are some times when I don't like myself, where I really am kind of mean and jerky, and I've already told you I've admitted to lots of things I've said and done to people. And I said, yeah. And all those things you haven't let go of. You haven't forgiven yourself for that. You haven't accepted it as it is and as it wasn't. You haven't been able to see that you did what you did and be with that. Just be able to be with it and eventually let it go. After you can be with it and let it go, you can then like yourself again. I mean, the shame and the blame actually reinforced her thinking that she should continue to have low self-worth.
So is that like the fifth step, is the actually liking yourself again after the self-centeredness?
Yeah, well, being willing to see that you do have to be willing to like yourself. You have to be willing to love yourself.
Right.
And be willing to be tolerant of the fact that you didn't do it right. You weren't perfect. And let it go. Let go of the self-centeredness of everything. Like, look out at the world and realize that when someone cuts me off in traffic, it's not because they're a jerk.
Right.
If I get upset that somebody cut me off in traffic, I'm the jerk.
Yeah, you don't put yourself to get that way.
Well, it's like I made myself get that way. Mm-hmm. They didn't do it to me. They just drove their car in front of my car.
Right.
Well, how do I know they're not on the way to the hospital to watch their baby be born or something,
Oh, yeah, you don't know the other person's story.
Right, and I just make up a story that fits with the resentment I already have and reinforces the bad feeling.
Right.
So I'm the one that's been the jerk, and I'm walking around spotting it in everybody else.
Yeah, it comes down to we always do all this stuff to ourselves.
Yes, and until I can really get honest about that, I can't let go of anything out there. Everybody else will just keep on triggering it. So I have to let go of it here first and see that there's a part of me that's just, doggone it, not perfect, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and when I can let go of that, no one will ever be able to hold a single one of them against me.
Right, because you don't allow it.
That's right.
You're not accepting of it, yeah.
It's not even an issue. It'd be like if somebody said, "You're a purple backpack." Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
I'd say, "Okay." Next, it's unreality.
Right. You just let it go.
Yeah. Once I let go of me being a bad mother, and it's not even real anymore. Now people could make a statement or an accusation to attempt to engage me in an argument. All they'd have to do is say, oh, well, where were you last week? You haven't spent much time with your kids lately. And I would say, last week was a really busy week. I was on the T-Love show, and I didn't really see my kids that much last week. You're right. I'm going to go spend some time with them.
Push your button sometimes, so you know.
Yeah.
You truly do.
Sure.
You know, the time has really flown by here tonight
Yeah.
already. I want to mention that you have a website where people can participate in a free self-help program to learn the healing power of authentic forgiveness. And I believe it's www.amendsproject.com.
Yes,
you want to
it
tell
is.
us a little bit about that?
Sure. I developed this website because I love to write, and I know the power, the healing power of writing. And I took the assignment that I often will give clients, or I've used it myself, to write letters to the people that you would like to forgive, and it could be to yourself too. And then I coached them through the process. The first letter somebody would write would probably include include all the resentment, all the anger, all of your old ideas about what happened, all of your blame, everything. Just let it out on the table. And then you write the letter, and then I'll coach them through identifying where are the old ideas in that letter that represent all those things you carry around in your life that still you keep looking for evidence of and you keep seeing and keeps causing you pain. And then it's really a neat metaphor, because as the person removes each one of those things from their letter, it's like a symbolism of being willing to let go of it. And by the time they've written their final draft of the letter, there's no more resentment or anger or blame or shame in the letter. And what you find is people actually deep down, they get back down to the love they had for the person, which had been disappointed or unfulfilled. And now you're left with a letter that is this beautiful testament to the relationship. Mm-hmm. And there's this beauty and peace. And, I mean, I think you went to the website, so you probably read some of those letters. They're very touching.
They are touching, and it's a great project, Amends Project, perfect name.
Thank you.
You know, for forgiveness letters, and there are examples there. But I know that it does work, because sometimes even when you're upset about an email that you might get, I won't put the to line in because I'm afraid I might hit send, and I just vent, and then I vent, and I delete, and I vent, and then I delete. And after about an hour of this, you come up with something that's reasonable.
Yes.
Where you can actually put a name in the to field.
That's right.
And send the email along. So, but to have it online, now people can do this actually online.
They can. What they would do is submit their letter. They go to the submission page, and then they would submit the letter, and then we would receive it, and then there would be a process of drafting the letter over and over again. It takes usually 2 or 3 tries before the letter is ready to be published on the website.
It's a great project. Now, you also, I believe, have a book coming out?
Well, I'm working on a book. I've got it. It's in process right now. It's a book called An Economy of Words. And it's essentially, I've made up the term true fiction, because it's a book that is inspired by my life, by my experiences as a therapist, and also my experiences as a client, and my experiences of being a therapist who experienced some painful stuff in my own life that needed to be forgiven, and then actually I used the whole experience that I was going through to not only inform the work I was doing with my clients, but I used the work happening with my clients to inform my healing process. Okay. And I have created this whole story in a fictional sense to make sure that I protect the identities of any and all of the people that were involved. So some of this is going to be literally pure fiction that I get to just dream up. But the concepts in this are forgiveness, reconciliation. Essentially, we teach what we need to learn, and this is what happens, or what happened to the therapist in this book. Her name's Margaret, not Liza. Okay. But she goes through the experience of sitting on this side of the couch giving the advice she needed. Ah, okay. That's great. It sounds like a great book. When is it expected to be published? I would say probably about a year from now. It's about halfway done. Oh, good. Oh, well, I really, I wish you all the best of luck on your book. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was very informative, and I'm quite sure very helpful to all of our listeners. So best of luck to you, and thank you once again for being on the show. Well, thank you, too.
No, you're quite welcome. I'd like to thank all of our listeners as well for tuning in to Energy Awareness. My name is T. Love, and I hope you'll be back next Wednesday when we'll have as our guest Mick Quinn, the author of The Uncommon Path to Awakening Authentic Joy. This is a book that answers the question, why is lasting peace so elusive? And this book really inspires change by helping you understand yourself and how you relate to the world around you. So be sure to mark your calendar, write it in your planner, and make the time to tune in. It'll be a great show. So this is T. Love at Energy Awareness, intending you have a great week. Take care and stay well.